Is Bitcoin due for a correction? Is a correction imminent right now? We try to answer those questions on today's show. In a recent article I published on Friday, I laid out the two most likely paths that Bitcoin will take in the coming weeks. One of these scenarios would be if Bitcoin were to just continue on higher up to, say, $58,000 and then subsequently have a crash down to, say, 44,000 or even lower possibly before resuming its uptrend for the halving narrative. The other scenario I outlined, which from the daily action so far looks to be the more likely scenario, and that would be we simply keep moving sideways and consolidating. And in that case, Bitcoin could possibly forego even having any severe correction, and the 2024 bull market could just continue to take off from this price point. So those are the two ways I see Bitcoin going in the coming days to weeks. Either crashing after continuing higher to possibly 58,000 or consolidating around the $52,000 level and continuing higher from there. Let's take another longer term view of Bitcoin and see what else we can glean. Now, switched over to a monthly chart, we get a more encompassing view of what's been going on over the past 6 months in Bitcoin. As you can see here, we have had 6 consecutive green monthly candles, and I highly doubt that February, even if it has a major correction, will turn red. Not impossible, but I'm going to bet that we will have some sort of a green candle for February. If that's the case, how much longer can Bitcoin keep printing out these green months? Let's look back in time to see how long Bitcoin has had these running streaks for. We're going to first compare it to the run-up of 2020. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 green candles in a row. Yes, these candles are larger than these, but still, nonetheless, it's 6 months of green candles. And we can't really go back in time and find a single point when there was more than 6 months of upticks. The only other time back in 2012 we had another 6-month winning streak. We have never gone a 7th month without printing a red candle. But wait, there's more. There's more technical evidence that we might be at a temporary peak in pricing. I have just switched it over to a live or spot Bitcoin chart, and let's turn it off of log scale for a second. I've gone ahead and drawn in what I believe to be the Elliott wave count. We have the all-time high. Immediately following that, we went into a 5-wave bear count or impulse cycle that took us down to the lows near 15,000. Now, since then, by the way, this was exactly 1 year after we hit the peak. Keep that in mind. We hit the peak November 21. We hit the bottom November 2022. In November of 2022, we started our 5-wave bull count. The 5th wave doesn't necessarily have to be over. It could go longer than this, but I'm betting that it won't. And here's why. One way to determine the length of the 5th wave is a very simple comparison of wave 3 to wave 5. One of the accepted lengths of the 5th wave is to be 0.618 the length of the 3rd wave, which is basically precisely where we have ended up, right at the resistance of 53,000. So that's what's telling me that this 5th wave is probably done, and we are most likely due for an imminent correction. That, along with the fact that we have had 6 green months at the end of this month, if it remains green, that is, tells me that corrections are probably on the horizon for Bitcoin. So let's go back to our chart with more data on it. On this chart, I have green lines representing every date of the block reward halvings. Remember that it took exactly 1 year from the all-time high to the low at around 15,000. And I'm having you remember that because I want to go over the cyclical nature that surrounds halving cycles one more time and bring where we are in that timeline into focus. Again, these green lines represent the date of each halving event. And if we do a simple measurement here, we could see from the all-time high to the recent lows. Remember we said this is 1 year? And let's go from this cycle's all-time high to the lows. See how they happened in 1 year, approximately each of them? So 1 year correcting. We're going to take one other measurement, and that's what I have in green right here. And that measurement is simply when we surpass the previous cycle's high. As you can see, in our last cycle, it took approximately 48 weeks. So in our 2016 to 2020 cycle, we went as high as 1200. When did we first hit 1200? Right here in February 2017 to this record high, 42 weeks. And if we even look further, we have this top right here at around $27. When we surpassed $27 was right about here to this all-time high, once again 41 weeks. So you could see these clear time frames for these cyclical moves in Bitcoin. We have a little bit less than a year after crossing the previous threshold till we hit a new record, and 1 year following that to hit our bottom. And when we look at the areas in between these colored areas left are approximately 2 years in length. So we have 1 year, 2 years, and then a 2 year. People call this a consolidation phase. It is, but it's actually tilted to the upside. And let me explain this and show you why I believe that. When we take it off log scale, you can see that this section right here was definitely to the upside. It had a short flat period, but it was still, the rest of it was to the upside of this 2 year period. If we go in and look at this 2 year period, yes, we had a little top in between, but it was generally to the upside. And this crash here was due to COVID. COVID-19 didn't happen. The chart would look more like a straight line, gradually moving up until we hit or surpassed the previous record high. So it does indeed follow 4 year cycles. If you'll notice, the green lines representing the halving dates don't exactly line up with these 4 year cycles. They are very close. My purpose of this is to show you that Bitcoin is indeed still following this cycle, and it is a 4 year cycle that's somewhat centered around halving dates, but not precisely. So with that in mind, we can assume that until we crack above 70,000, we are still in this 2 year period. And let's just for shits and giggles, November 2022, let's go to November 2024. This is the approximate date, if it continues to follow these cycles, that Bitcoin will surpass $70,000. So we're looking for it to surpass 70,000 by November of 2024. And with that, the cycle will continue. Our short-term outlook is much different than our long-term outlook. Keep that in mind. So whether or not it continues up straight to here or has a correction, which I think is very likely before we crack the all-time high, either way, it's still following the pattern and patterns make profits if you can predict them. Thank you very much. We'll talk to you next week.